A gunshot echoed through the dimly lit saloon, freezing every soul in their tracks except for Katherine Hayes, who dropped to her knees, clutching her husband's lifeless body as blood pooled on the rough wooden floor beneath him. The year was 1885, and in the small town of Globe, Arizona, Katherine's life had just shattered beyond recognition. "James," she whispered, her trembling fingers tracing his ashen face. "James, please." But her husband of 8 years would never respond again, gunned down in a card game dispute that had escalated too quickly for anyone to intervene. 6 months later, Katherine stood behind the bar of the very same establishment, the Silver Dollar Saloon, her black mourning dress replaced by a practical blouse and skirt. At 32, she was still beautiful, with copper hair pulled back in a simple knot and green eyes that had once sparkled with joy but now remained guarded, distant. Working at the Silver Dollar hadn't been her first choice, but with winter approaching and the money from James's modest mining ventures long gone, Katherine had few options in a town where women alone rarely prospered. "Another whiskey for the gentleman at the end," called Beatrice, the older barmaid who had taken Katherine under her wing. Katherine nodded, reaching for the bottle. As she poured, she felt the familiar stares burning into her back. Globe was a mining town with strict notions about propriety, and a widow working in a saloon invited speculation and judgment. The whispers had begun almost immediately after she'd accepted the position that she was ruined, fallen, perhaps even working in capacities beyond serving drinks. "Don't you worry about them vultures," Beatrice muttered as she passed. "They got nothing better to do than squawk." Katherine managed a small smile. "I stopped caring what they thought weeks ago. It wasn't entirely true. The sideways glances from women she'd once called friends still stung. The way Mrs. Peterson had pulled her children closer when Katherine passed them on the street had been a particularly painful blow. But pride kept her chin high as she moved between tables, collecting empty glasses and avoiding wandering hands. "Well, look who it is," a slurred voice called out as Katherine approached a corner table. The widow Hayes, serving drinks instead of being at home like a proper woman. Harold Wilson, the bank manager's son, leaned forward, his breath reeking of cheap liquor. "My father says no decent man will have you now." "Your father should worry more about your tab than my prospects, Mr. Wilson," Katherine replied coolly, though her heart raced. "You owe $4.30. His companion snickered, but Harold's face darkened. "Think you're too good for this place. We all know why Sam hired you, and it wasn't for your skills with a whiskey bottle." Katherine felt heat rise to her face, but maintained her composure. "Pay your tab or take it up with Mr. Fletcher." As she turned away, Harold grabbed her wrist, pulling her closer. "Maybe I'll pay for more than drinks tonight. That's enough." The voice was deep and steady, cutting through the haze of smoke and piano music. Katherine glanced up to see a tall man standing beside their table. She recognized him vaguely, a rancher who occasionally came to town for supplies. He wasn't particularly imposing in build, but something in his stance commanded attention. "Let the lady go," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Harold sneered. "Mind your business, O'Malley." "This ain't your concern." "I'm making it my concern." The man, O'Malley, didn't raise his voice, but his hand rested casually near the holster on his hip. "Now let her go before I decide this establishment would look better with one less drunk." For a tense moment, Katherine thought Harold might escalate the situation. Then he released her wrist with a dismissive shove. "She ain't worth the trouble anyway." O'Malley's eyes, a startling blue against his sun-weathered face, flicked to Katherine. "You all right, madam?" "I'm fine," she said, straightening her sleeve. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley, but I can handle myself." Something like amusement flickered across his face. Never doubted it for a second. As Katherine moved away, she heard Harold mutter, defending saloon women now, O'Malley. Standards dropping at that fancy ranch of yours. She didn't hear the rancher's response, but whatever he said silenced the table effectively. The remainder of the evening passed without incident, though Katherine caught O'Malley watching her several times from his position at the bar. He didn't drink much, nursing a single whiskey as the hours ticked by. Just before closing, as Katherine was wiping down tables, he approached her. "Mrs. Hayes." She looked up, surprised he knew her name. "Yes, Mr. O'Malley, Daniel O'Malley," he said, extending his hand. "I own the Silvercreek Ranch about 15 miles north of town." Katherine hesitantly took his hand. His palm was calloused but warm, the handshake brief but firm. "I wanted to apologize for interfering earlier," he continued. "I know you said you could handle yourself." Katherine set down her rag. No need for apologies. It was appreciated, even if unnecessary. Daniel O'Malley was probably in his late 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly where it met the collar of his shirt. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His nose had been broken at some point, and lines creased the corners of his eyes, but there was something compelling in his direct gaze. "I heard about your husband," he said. "I'm sorry for your loss." Katherine nodded stiffly. "Thank you." "I also heard you might be looking for different employment." She tensed. "Who told you that?" "Doc Evans. He mentioned you'd been asking around for work." Dr. Evans was one of the few people in town who still treated Katherine with kindness. He'd been James's friend and had tried to help her secure a position as a seamstress or housekeeper after his death. "I'm managing fine here," she said defensively. Daniel glanced around the near-empty saloon. "No doubt, but I came to offer you a position at my ranch. My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing sister in Tucson. I need someone to cook, clean, and generally keep things in order." Katherine studied him suspiciously. "Why would you offer me such a position? You don't know me." "I know you're in a tough spot. And I know good people in this town are making it harder instead of easier." His expression softened slightly. "It's honest work, Mrs. Hayes. Better pay than here, I'd wager, and you'd have your own quarters in the main house." The offer was tempting, almost too tempting. "Are there others at this ranch of yours?" He nodded. 4 ranch hands who stay in the bunkhouse. My foreman, Jose Mendoza, and his wife Elena live in a separate cabin. Elena would welcome another woman around the place." Katherine hesitated. Leaving town would mean escaping the daily judgment, but going to work for a man she barely knew carried its own risks. "Think it over," Daniel said, seeming to read her concerns. "I'm in town until tomorrow afternoon. I'm staying at the boarding house if you decide you're interested." With that, he tipped his hat and left, leaving Katherine staring after him. "I'd take that offer if I were you," Beatrice said, appearing at her elbow. "Daniel O'Malley's got a reputation as a fair employer, pays on time, treats his people right." "You know him," Beatrice nodded. "My nephew worked for him for a spell before heading to California. Said O'Malley runs the cleanest outfit in the territory." Katherine bit her lip. "It seems too convenient. Girl, in this life, you take the good chances when they come. They're rare enough." Beatrice's weathered face softened. "And you deserve better than what this town's giving you." That night, in her small rented room above the general store, Katherine lay awake, weighing her options. The silver dollar paid enough to keep her housed and fed, but just barely. Winter would make everything harder. And each day brought fresh humiliation as more townspeople turned against her. By morning, she'd made her decision. Daniel O'Malley looked up from his breakfast at the boarding house when Katherine entered. He stood politely as she approached his table. "Mrs. Hayes." "Mr. O'Malley." She took a deep breath. I'd like to accept your offer of employment if it still stands. A slight smile lifted one corner of his mouth. It does. I should warn you, my cooking skills are adequate but not exceptional. I've been eating my own cooking for a month. Adequate would be a vast improvement. They discussed the specifics: her wages, duties, and living arrangements. The pay was indeed better than the saloon, and the prospect of escaping Globe's judgment was worth any risk. I can be ready to leave by noon, she said finally. Daniel nodded. I'll come by with the wagon. News of Katherine's imminent departure spread quickly through town. As she packed her meager belongings and settled her accounts, she endured pointed comments and knowing looks. Going to work for O'Malley, are you? Mrs. Peterson remarked loudly in the general store. I suppose some men aren't particular about a woman's reputation. Some women aren't particular about their tongues, Katherine replied evenly. Good day, Mrs. Peterson. Sam Fletcher, the saloon owner, was more understanding. Can't say I blame you for taking a better offer, he said as he paid her final wages. Town's been unfair to you, Katherine. O'Malley's a decent sort. You'll do well there. When the wagon pulled up outside the general store at precisely noon, Katherine was ready. Daniel loaded her trunk while she said goodbye to the few people who had remained kind to her: Beatrice, Dr. Evans, and Mr. Collins from the general store. You write if you need anything, Beatrice insisted, embracing her tightly. And don't you let that cowboy work you too hard. As they drove away, Katherine didn't look back at the town that had once been home but had become a place of sorrow and judgment. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the road ahead, the vast Arizona landscape stretching before them, harsh yet beautiful in the October sunlight. The journey to Silvercreek Ranch took several hours. Daniel wasn't particularly talkative, but the silence between them was comfortable rather than strained. Occasionally, he pointed out landmarks or shared brief information about the area. That ridge there marks the northern boundary of my property, he said as they crested a hill in the late afternoon. The ranch house is just beyond that stand of cottonwoods. Katherine leaned forward slightly, taking in her first view of what would be her new home. The ranch house was larger than she'd expected, a substantial two-story structure built of stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and in the distance, she could see corrals and a large barn. It's beautiful, she said honestly. Daniel glanced at her, something like pride in his expression. Built it myself, most of it. Took 3 years. You've been here that long, going on 10 years now. Came out from Colorado in '75. As they approached, Katherine noticed a woman emerging from one of the smaller cabins. She was perhaps a few years older than Katherine, with dark hair streaked with silver and a welcoming smile. That's Elena Mendoza, Daniel explained. She's been looking forward to meeting you. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the main house, and Daniel jumped down to help Katherine descend. Before her feet touched the ground, Elena was hurrying over. Mrs. Hayes, welcome to Silvercreek. Her accent was softly musical. We are so pleased you have come. Katherine found herself enveloped in a warm embrace, surprising after the cold shoulders of Globe. Thank you, Mrs. Mendoza. I'm grateful for the welcome. Elena, please, we are not so formal here. She turned to Daniel. Jose has gone to check the north pasture. He said to tell you the fence repair is finished. Daniel nodded. Good. I'll show Mrs. Hayes to her quarters then. I have prepared a small meal for your arrival, Elena added. Nothing fancy, but you must be hungry after your journey. Inside, the ranch house was simply but comfortably furnished. The main level contained a large kitchen, a dining area, and a spacious sitting room with well-worn leather chairs and bookshelves that surprised Katherine with their contents, not just practical manuals but novels, history books, and poetry collections. "Your room is upstairs," Daniel said, carrying her trunk effortlessly. "First door on the right." The room was modest but pleasant, with a comfortable-looking bed, a small writing desk, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the ranch. Someone, Alina, presumably had placed a small vase of late wildflowers on the desk. "The washroom is at the end of the hall," Daniel explained. "There's a pump in the kitchen for water. In winter, we keep a fire going in the main hearth day and night. Your duties would include maintaining that, along with cooking and general housekeeping." Katherine nodded. "It seems straightforward enough. I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's usually at 6, but Alina's prepared something earlier today on account of your arrival." When he'd gone, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. Just hours ago, she'd been in Globe, trapped in a cycle of judgment and barely making ends meet. Now she was miles from town, in a stranger's home, embarking on something entirely new. She allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel uncertain before unpacking her trunk and washing the dust from her face and hands. Whatever came next, it had to be better than what she'd left behind. Downstairs, she found Alina laying out a simple but appetizing meal of stew, fresh bread, and apple preserves. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. "He has gone to check the horses," Alina explained. "Men cannot sit still when there is work they can be doing." Katherine smiled. James was the same way. "Your husband?" When Katherine nodded, Alina continued gently, "Daniel mentioned you were widowed. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Katherine hesitated. "May I ask, why did Mr. O'Malley offer me this position?" Truly, Alina's dark eyes were kind. "Daniel is a good man. He does not like injustice." She shrugged. "And he needed a housekeeper. The ranch has suffered without one." Before Katherine could press further, the door opened and Daniel entered, accompanied by a lean, weathered man with salt and pepper hair who Katherine assumed was Jose Mendoza. Introductions were made, and the four of them sat down to the meal. Conversation flowed more easily than Katherine had expected. Jose asked thoughtful questions about her background, while Alina offered insights into life at the ranch. Daniel remained somewhat reserved, but Katherine occasionally caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "The men will expect breakfast at sunrise," Daniel explained as they discussed her duties. "Dinner at noon, supper at 6. Between meals, the house is yours to manage as you see fit. The previous housekeeper, Miss Abernathy, kept a garden in summer," Jose added, "if you have interest in such things." "I do, actually," Katherine said. "My mother taught me gardening when I was young." "Then you will enjoy the spring," Alina said with a smile. "The soil here is good with proper attention." As the meal concluded, Katherine found herself relaxing for the first time in months. These people didn't look at her with suspicion or contempt. Here, miles from the gossip of Globe, she was simply Mrs. Hayes, the housekeeper, not the fallen widow from the saloon. Over the next few days, Katherine settled into a routine. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Daniel and the ranch hands, 4 men of varying ages who treated her with polite respect. After they'd ridden out for the day's work, she cleaned the house, did laundry, and prepared the midday and evening meals. Alina proved to be not just a neighbor but a friend, stopping by daily to help with various tasks and teach Katherine the rhythms of ranch life. "Daniel likes his coffee strong," she advised one morning, "and always put salt in the dough for biscuits before the lard." Katherine appreciated the guidance. Though she'd managed a household with James, ranch life had its own demands and peculiarities. Alina's wisdom made the transition smoother. Daniel himself remained something of an enigma. He was unfailingly polite, thanking her for meals and occasionally commenting on improvements she made to the house. But he rarely initiated conversation beyond necessary communication about ranch matters. In the evenings, he often retreated to his study or sat on the porch, smoking a pipe and gazing at the stars. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, Katherine found him in the sitting room with a book open on his lap. She had intended to retrieve her mending but hesitated in the doorway. "Don't let me disturb you," Daniel said, looking up. "I was just reading." Katherine glanced at the volume. "Whitman," he seemed surprised by her recognition. "You know his work." James had a volume of Leaves of Grass. I found it comforting after. She trailed off, then continued more briskly, "I just came for my sewing." As she collected her basket, Daniel asked, "What did you do before?" "Before your husband passed?" The question caught her off guard. "I kept our home. Occasionally, I took in sewing or helped at community events." She hesitated. "James was a mining engineer. We moved quite often for his work, so I never established myself in any particular profession." "How did you come to Globe?" James heard about promising silver deposits. "We'd been there about 3 years when he died." Katherine's fingers tightened on her sewing basket. "He was shot during an argument over cards. The man claimed James had cheated, which was ridiculous. James rarely gambled, and when he did, it was for small stakes and enjoyment, not profit." Daniel was watching her with quiet intensity. "And after I discovered James had debts I hadn't known about. Medical bills from when he'd broken his leg the year before, some failed investments. Once those were settled, there was very little left." She lifted her chin. "The saloon wasn't my first choice, but it was the only place hiring." "You did what was necessary to survive," Daniel said simply. "There's no shame in that." Katherine managed a small smile. "Tell that to the good people of Globe. People find it easier to judge than understand." His expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you've shown remarkable strength." The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley." "Daniel," he corrected. "If we're to share this house, you might as well use my given name." "Daniel," she repeated. "And you should call me Katherine." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Katherine, then." The small exchange marked a subtle shift in their relationship. Over the following days, Daniel began to join her in the kitchen occasionally, talking while she prepared meals. She learned he'd come west after the war, working on various ranches before saving enough to buy his own land. "It was nothing but scrub and rocks when I started," he told her one evening as she kneaded bread dough. "Everyone said I was a fool to think it could support cattle." "Clearly they were wrong," he shrugged. "It took years of work. There were times I nearly gave up." "What kept you going?" Daniel considered the question. "Stubbornness, mostly, and nowhere else to go." Katherine understood that feeling all too well. As November progressed, the weather grew colder. The ranch's rhythms changed. With the season, cattle were moved to sheltered pastures. Preparations were made for winter storms. Katherine found herself busier than ever, preserving the last of the garden's produce, mending heavy blankets and cooking heartier meals for men working in the cold. One morning, she woke to find the world transformed by an early snowfall. Though not deep, the white blanket created an ethereal beauty across the ranch. She was admiring the view from the kitchen window when Daniel entered, stamping snow from his boots. "Storms moving in from the north," he said. "This is just the beginning." "Will it be very bad?" "Hard to say. Best prepare for a few days of being housebound, just in case." Throughout the day, they made preparations, bringing in extra firewood, checking food supplies, securing outbuildings. By evening, the snow was falling more heavily, and the wind had picked up considerably. After supper, Katherine sat by the fire in the sitting room mending one of Daniel's shirts. He entered with 2 mugs of coffee, offering one to her. "Thank you." She accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into her fingers. Daniel settled into the chair opposite. Outside, the wind howled around the corners of the house. "First winter storm is always the hardest," he commented. Katherine looked up from her stitching. "Why is that?" "Reminds you how isolated you really are out here." He took a sip of his coffee. "In summer, it's easy to forget how quickly you can be cut off from the world." She considered this. "I don't mind the isolation, I think, after Globe." She shook her head. "It's peaceful here. It can be." He studied her for a moment. "You've adjusted well, better than I expected." "Did you think I wouldn't?" Town women often find ranch life difficult. The solitude, the work, the distance from civilization. Katherine set down her sewing. "I'm not sure I'd call the treatment I received in Globe civilized." "Fair point." A faint smile crossed his face. "You've proven yourself remarkably capable, Katherine Hayes." Something in the way he said her name made her heart beat a little faster. "I've had excellent teachers," she replied, thinking of Alina's patient guidance. "Alina says you're a natural. She's too kind." They fell into comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and the storm outside. Katherine resumed her stitching, aware of Daniel watching her, his expression thoughtful. "May I ask you something personal?" he finally said. She looked up, surprised. "You may ask. I might not answer." His smile deepened briefly. "Fair enough. I was wondering if you ever thought about leaving Globe before circumstances forced your hand." Katherine considered the question. "Sometimes. James was restless by nature. We'd moved so many times that I'd started to feel untethered. Part of me wanted to settle permanently, but another part—" She paused. "Another part wondered if we'd ever find a place that truly felt like home." And did Globe feel like home? For a time. When the town turned against me, I realized how tenuous my connection to it had always been. She set down her mending again. "May I ask you something in return?" Daniel nodded. "Why did you really offer me this position?" He didn't answer immediately, taking a long sip of his coffee instead. "Finally," he said, "I saw someone being treated unjustly and had the means to offer an alternative." "Simple charity, then?" She couldn't keep a hint of disappointment from her voice. "No." His blue eyes met hers directly. "Recognition." "Of what?" "Of someone who deserved better than what life had handed them." He set down his mug. "I came west with nothing, Katherine. No family, no prospects. Just determination and the clothes on my back. I know what it's like to be judged for circumstances rather than character." The vulnerability in his admission touched her. "Thank you for your honesty." He nodded once, then changed the subject to more practical matters, plans for the following day, concerns about livestock in the storm. But something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding established. The storm intensified overnight, confining everyone to the ranch buildings for 3 days. Katherine used the time to thoroughly clean areas of the house she hadn't yet tackled, including the study where Daniel kept his business records. She was organizing a bookshelf when she came across a framed photograph partially hidden behind some volumes. It showed a much younger Daniel standing beside a lovely dark-haired woman, both smiling. "My wife, Rebecca." Katherine startled at Daniel's voice behind her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." He stepped into the room, taking the photograph from her. "It's all right. It was a long time ago." "What happened to her?" Katherine asked gently. "Fever. Our 2nd year out here." His expression remained neutral, but Katherine sensed the depth of loss beneath his composure. "She wanted this ranch as much as I did. Never got to see it become what it is now. I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "As I said, it was a long time ago." He carefully returned the photograph to its place. "Almost 15 years now." The revelation that Daniel had also experienced profound loss explained something about him, his self-contained nature, perhaps the quiet strength he projected. "Does it ever stop hurting?" she asked suddenly, then flushed. "Forgive me, that's too personal." Daniel considered her question seriously. "It changes," he said finally, "becomes something you carry rather than something that drags you under." He met her eyes. "But you know that already," Katherine nodded. 6 months after James's death, the raw agony had indeed transformed into something more manageable, a steady ache, rather than a debilitating wound. When the storm finally broke, the ranch returned to its normal routines. December arrived with clear, cold days and crystalline nights. Katherine found herself looking forward to Christmas, something she hadn't expected. Last year's holiday had been a somber affair, her first without James. One evening, Alina invited Katherine and Daniel to dinner at their cabin. It was a festive meal, with Jose recounting stories of Christmases in his native Mexico and Alina serving traditional dishes Katherine had never tasted before. Walking back to the main house under a canopy of stars, Katherine found herself smiling. "You enjoyed yourself," Daniel observed. "I did." "They're wonderful people. They think the same of you." Katherine glanced at him, surprised. "They've said so." "Alina mentions daily how pleased she is to have another woman on the ranch." He hesitated. "We all are pleased that you're here." Something warm unfurled in Katherine's chest at his words. "I'm glad to be here too." As Christmas approached, Katherine noticed Daniel making several trips to town, returning with mysterious packages he stored in his study. When she questioned him, he merely smiled enigmatically. On Christmas Eve, after preparing a special supper for the ranch hands and seeing them off to their own celebrations, Katherine was surprised when Daniel asked her to join him in the sitting room. "I have something for you," he said, seeming almost nervous. He handed her a small, neatly wrapped package. Inside, Katherine found a leather-bound volume of poetry, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets. "Daniel." She breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "I noticed you looking at it in Collins's store when we left Globe. I asked him to set it aside for me." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her deeply. "It's perfect, thank you." She hesitated. "I have something for you as well, though it's not nearly so fine." Katherine retrieved her own gift from where she'd hidden it in her sewing basket. She'd spent evenings crafting a new leather case for his pipe and tobacco, tooling a simple but elegant design into the material. Daniel's expression as he examined it made her efforts worthwhile. "You made this," she nodded. "Jose helped with some of the leather work." "It's excellent craftsmanship." His fingers traced the pattern. "Thank you, Katherine." They sat together by the fire, the room decorated with pine boughs Katherine had gathered and arranged. The peaceful moment stretched between them, comfortable and warm. "I was thinking," Daniel said eventually, "that we might invite some neighbors for New Year's dinner. The Hendersons from the next ranch over, the Wilsons who run the stage stop. Would you mind the extra work?" "Not at all. I'd enjoy it." He seemed pleased by her response. "Good." It's been some time since Silvercreek hosted guests. The New Year's gathering was a success, bringing life and laughter to the ranch house. Katherine prepared an impressive meal, and Alina helped serve the dozen guests who attended. Daniel, to Katherine's surprise, proved to be a gracious host, his usual reserve giving way to quiet charm. As midnight approached, one of the guests produced a fiddle, and impromptu dancing began in the cleared sitting room. Katherine watched from the sidelines, enjoying the festive atmosphere. "May I have this dance?" Daniel appeared before her, hand extended. Katherine hesitated. "I haven't danced since your husband passed." When she nodded, he said gently, "It's just a dance, Katherine." She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her among the other couples. Daniel proved to be a capable dancer, guiding her smoothly through the simple country waltz. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, his blue eyes intent on hers. "You dance well," she commented, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. Rebecca insisted I learn. Said no husband of hers would step on her toes at social gatherings. The mention of his wife didn't carry the sadness Katherine might have expected. Instead, there was a fondness in his tone, a healthy remembrance rather than lingering grief. "James had 2 left feet," Katherine confided. "He tried so hard but never quite mastered it," Daniel smiled. "Some men aren't made for dancing, but they have other qualities." "Indeed." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "James was fortunate to have you as his wife." The compliment warmed her. "As Rebecca was fortunate to have you as her husband." As midnight struck, and the new year of 1886 began, Katherine found herself surprisingly content. The path that had led her to Silvercreek had been painful, but standing in Daniel's arms as neighbors and friends celebrated around them, she felt the first real stirrings of hope for the future. January brought bitter cold, but also a steadily strengthening bond between Katherine and Daniel. Their evenings often ended with conversations by the fire, discussing books, sharing memories, or simply enjoying companionable silence. She learned that beneath his reserved exterior, Daniel possessed both intelligence and dry wit. He was well-read despite limited formal education, and his observations about human nature were insightful. Katherine found herself looking forward to these quiet moments together, even as she cautioned herself against reading too much into them. Daniel had been kind to her, certainly, but his motives might be nothing more than friendship and the natural connection between 2 people who had experienced similar losses. One particularly cold evening, as they sat reading by the fire, Katherine glanced up to find Daniel watching her instead of his book. "What is it?" she asked, self-consciously touching her hair. "You look settled," he said. "When you first came here, there was something guarded in your expression. That's changed." Katherine considered his observation. "I feel settled," she admitted. "More at peace than I've been in a long time. I'm glad." His voice was low, sincere. Their eyes held for a moment longer than usual, and Katherine felt something shift between them, a recognition of possibilities neither had yet acknowledged aloud. The moment was interrupted by a pounding on the front door. Daniel frowned, setting aside his book to answer it. Katherine heard voices in the entryway, Daniel's and another man's, urgent and concerned. She rose just as Daniel returned to the sitting room, his expression grave. "Jose's oldest boy rode over from the Hendersons' ranch," he explained. "Rachel Henderson's in labor, but something's wrong. The baby's coming early, and they can't get to town for the doctor because of the snow." Katherine immediately grasped the seriousness of the situation. "Does Alina know?" The boy went there first. "She's gathering what supplies she has, but she sent for you specifically. Said you might have experience." "My mother was a midwife," Katherine confirmed, already moving toward the stairs. "Let me gather some things." Within minutes, she had collected clean cloths, her small medical kit, and herbs she'd dried during the fall. Daniel had saddled 2 horses by the time she came downstairs. "It's too cold for riding," he objected when she saw the horses. "Faster than the wagon in this snow," Daniel countered. "And time matters." The ride to the Henderson ranch was grueling. Despite her heavy coat, the cold bit through to Katherine's bones, and the snow-covered trail made progress slow. Daniel rode beside her, occasionally reaching out to steady her when her horse struggled through deeper drifts. They arrived to find the Henderson household in a state of controlled panic. Rachel's husband John paced the main room while their 3 children huddled together on a bench, wide-eyed and frightened. Alina was already in the bedroom with Rachel. Katherine hurried inside, pausing only to give Daniel's arm a reassuring squeeze before joining Alina. Rachel Henderson lay pale and sweating on the bed, her face contorted in pain. Alina looked up with relief when Katherine entered. "The baby is turned wrong," she explained quietly. "I can feel it, and Rachel is exhausted." Katherine removed her coat and rolled up her sleeves, approaching the bed. "Rachel, it's Katherine Hayes. I'm going to help you, all right?" Rachel nodded weakly. "I can't. It hurts too much." "I know, but you're strong and so is your baby." Katherine examined Rachel carefully, confirming Alina's assessment that the baby was in a breech position. "We're going to work together now." What followed was an intense struggle that lasted through the night. Katherine drew on everything her mother had taught her about difficult deliveries, guiding Rachel through the most challenging birth she'd ever attended. Alina proved an invaluable assistant, steady and capable as the hours passed. Outside the bedroom, Daniel and John Henderson maintained their vigil. Occasionally, Katherine would emerge for fresh water or additional supplies, offering what reassurance she could. "You look exhausted," Daniel murmured during one such moment, pressing a cup of coffee into her hands. "I'm fine." Katherine took a grateful sip. Rachel's doing the real work. Dawn was breaking when the Hendersons' 4th child finally entered the world, a small but healthy boy with strong lungs that announced his arrival decisively. Katherine placed the swaddled infant in Rachel's arms, her own hands trembling with exhaustion and relief. "He's perfect," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you." After ensuring mother and baby were stable and showing John how to care for them, Katherine finally allowed herself to acknowledge her own exhaustion. She stepped into the main room where Daniel sat by the fire. He rose immediately. "It's done." "A boy," she confirmed, swaying slightly on her feet. "Small but strong." Daniel crossed to her in 2 strides, supporting her elbow. "You're dead on your feet. I'm just tired." But she leaned into his strength gratefully. "I'll take you home." Alina emerged from the bedroom. "Go." "I will stay with Rachel until tomorrow. Jose will bring fresh supplies later." The ride back to Silvercreek passed in a blur for Katherine. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the night faded, leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. At one point, she nearly slipped from her saddle, and Daniel insisted she ride with him the rest of the way, his arms secure around her. Back at the ranch house, he helped her inside. "You need sleep." "I should make breakfast first," she protested weakly. Daniel gave her a stern look. "The men can fend for themselves one morning. You're going to bed." Too tired to argue, Katherine allowed him to guide her upstairs to her room. At the doorway, he hesitated. "What you did last night." He seemed to struggle for words. "It was remarkable, Katherine." She managed a tired smile. "I was just doing what needed to be done." "No." His hand came up to touch her cheek briefly. "It was more than that. You saved 2 lives." The simple touch sent warmth through her despite her exhaustion. "Thank you for getting me there. Rest now." His voice was gentle. "Everything else can wait." Katherine slept through most of the day, waking only briefly when Alina returned to check on her. By evening, she felt recovered enough to come downstairs, where she found Daniel in the kitchen, attempting to prepare supper. "What are you doing?" she asked, amused by the sight of him frowning at a pot of what appeared to be stew. He turned, relief crossing his features. "Trying not to poison myself. How are you feeling?" "Much better." She moved beside him, peering into the pot. "This actually looks edible. Don't sound so surprised." But he smiled as he said it. Katherine took over the cooking, and they shared a simple meal together. Afterward, instead of retreating to the sitting room as usual, Daniel lingered in the kitchen, helping her wash the dishes. "Rachel and the baby are doing well," he told her. "John rode over earlier to let us know." "I'm glad." Katherine wiped her hands on a towel. "It was touch and go for a while. Elena says without you they might have lost both mother and child." Katherine shook her head. "Elena deserves as much credit," she says differently. Daniel leaned against the counter. "You know, there's talk of trying to get a proper doctor to settle in the area. The nearest one's in Globe, and that's too far in emergencies. It would certainly help families like the Hendersons. Until then, it seems you're the closest thing we have." Katherine looked up, surprised. "I'm hardly qualified. You knew what to do when it mattered." His expression was serious. "That means something out here." The news spread quickly among the scattered ranches and homesteads that the new housekeeper at Silvercreek had delivered a breech baby successfully. Over the following weeks, Katherine found herself consulted for various minor medical issues: a ranch hand's infected cut, a neighboring child's persistent cough, a cowboy's sprained wrist. She never claimed any special knowledge, only offered what skills her mother had taught her and what she'd learned from books. But her willingness to help earned her respect throughout the community in a way she'd never experienced in Globe. February brought milder weather and increasing activity on the ranch as preparations began for spring calving. Katherine settled more deeply into her role, expanding her duties beyond basic housekeeping to include managing supplies, recording expenses, and occasionally helping with ranch paperwork when Daniel was occupied elsewhere. Their relationship continued to evolve in small, significant ways. Daniel began bringing her wildflowers he found on his rides around the property. Katherine took special care with his favorite meals. Their evening conversations grew longer, more personal. One night, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Daniel turned to her with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I've been thinking," he began. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. A smile flickered across his face. "Indeed." He sobered again. "I've been thinking about your position here." Katherine's heart sank. Despite their growing closeness, perhaps he'd decided her services were no longer needed. "Is there a problem with my work?" "No," he said quickly. "Quite the opposite." He shifted in his chair to face her more directly. "Katherine, you've become essential to Silvercreek, not just as a housekeeper but as a presence. The ranch runs better with you here. The men respect you, especially after the Henderson birth. Elena considers you family." Relief flooded through her. "I'm glad to hear it. I've come to love this place. And the people." His voice was carefully neutral. Katherine met his gaze steadily. "Some more than others." Something flickered in his blue eyes, hope perhaps, or resolve. "I don't want you to remain as my housekeeper." Before disappointment could take hold, he continued, "I want you to consider a different position entirely." "What position would that be?" Daniel took a deep breath. "My wife." Katherine stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Your wife." "I know it's sudden," he said hurriedly, "and perhaps improper, given our current arrangement. If you need time to consider, or if you wish to refuse entirely, I'll understand completely. Nothing would change regarding your position here." When she remained silent, he continued, his words coming faster now. "I should have prepared this better. Should have spoken more clearly about my feelings before now. The truth is, Katherine, I've grown to care for you deeply, more than I expected, more than I thought possible after Rebecca." Katherine found her voice at last. "Daniel, are you certain? It's a significant step. I've never been more certain of anything." His expression was earnest, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "I don't expect you to feel the same. It's been a short time and you're still healing from your loss. but I wanted you to know my intentions are honorable and my feelings are sincere." Katherine looked out at the darkening landscape, gathering her thoughts. The proposal had caught her completely off guard, yet as she considered it, she realized her feelings for Daniel had been growing steadily for months. "When James died," she said finally, "I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd spend the rest of my days alone." She turned back to him. "I never expected to find someone who would make me feel whole again." Hope dawned in Daniel's eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's a request for a proper courtship first," Katherine replied with a small smile. "I care for you too, Daniel, but I'd like to be sure we both know what we're entering into." The relief on his face was palpable. "A courtship it is, then, though I warn you my courting skills may be rusty. I'm sure you'll manage admirably." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "May I kiss you, Katherine, just once to seal our understanding?" Instead of answering, Katherine leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Daniel's lips met hers gently, the kiss brief but full of promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers for a moment. "I never thought I'd have this chance again," he murmured. "Nor I." Katherine squeezed his hand. "But here we are." Their courtship progressed with the changing seasons. Daniel proved surprisingly romantic once given permission to express his feelings. He brought Katherine small gifts, not just flowers now, but a silver hairpin he'd purchased in town, a scarf he'd had Alina help him select, books he thought she might enjoy. For her part, Katherine found herself falling more deeply in love with each passing day. She appreciated Daniel's quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, the way he treated everyone on the ranch with respect. Most of all, she treasured their conversations, the way they could discuss anything from ranch business to philosophy, sharing perspectives and challenging each other's thinking. News of their courtship spread through the neighboring ranches, met with general approval. A few raised eyebrows at the speed of the relationship, but most recognized the solid foundation it was built upon. In April, as the ranch burst into spring bloom, Daniel suggested they ride into Globe together. "Are you sure?" Katherine asked, uncertain about facing the town that had treated her so coldly. "I have business at the bank," he explained, "and I thought perhaps you might want to close that chapter properly." She understood what he meant. Although she'd moved forward with her life, the shadow of Globe's judgment still lingered in her past. Facing the town as the woman she was now respected, secure, loved might provide the closure she hadn't realized she needed. They made the journey on a clear Tuesday morning, arriving in Globe just before noon. Katherine felt a mixture of anxiety and determination as they rode down the main street. The town looked exactly as she remembered, yet somehow smaller, less significant. Several people recognized her immediately. Mrs. Peterson stood frozen outside the general store, her mouth falling open in surprise. Harold Wilson, emerging from the bank, did a comical double take. Katherine kept her head high, aware of Daniel riding protectively beside her. They dismounted in front of the bank and he offered her his arm openly, a clear statement of their relationship. "Mrs. Hayes," Harold Wilson approached, his manner oddly hesitant. "Didn't expect to see you back in town." "Mr. Wilson," Katherine nodded politely, "I'm accompanying Mr. O'Malley on business." Harold's eyes flicked between them, noting Daniel's possessive stance. "I see. Well, you're looking well, thank you, if you'll excuse us." As they moved toward the bank, Daniel murmured, "That's the same man from the saloon, isn't it?" "Yes, though considerably more polite today." Inside the bank, the manager greeted Daniel warmly while casting curious glances at Katherine. As Daniel conducted his business, she stood proudly at his side. No longer the desperate widow, but a woman with purpose and position. Afterward, Daniel suggested lunch at the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in Globe, where Katherine had never dined even during her better days with James. "Are you trying to make a statement?" she asked as he escorted her inside. His smile was slightly mischievous. "Perhaps a small one." The meal was excellent, but more satisfying was the ripple of speculation they created among the other diners. Katherine recognized the moment when understanding dawned that the fallen widow Hayes was now being courted by one of the most successful ranchers in the territory. As they prepared to leave town, Katherine asked Daniel to stop at one final location, the Silver Dollar Saloon. He raised an eyebrow but complied without comment. Inside, the saloon was quiet with only a few early patrons. Beatrice spotted her immediately, rushing over with a delighted cry. "Katherine Hayes, land's sakes, look at you." She embraced Katherine warmly. "You're positively glowing, girl." "Hello, Beatrice." Katherine returned the hug with genuine affection. "I wanted to see you while we were in town." Beatrice's sharp eyes found Daniel, who stood respectfully nearby. "Well now, Mr. O'Malley, I see you've been taking good care of our Katherine." Daniel inclined his head. "I believe it's been the other way around, madam." Sam Fletcher emerged from the back room, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Mrs. Hayes, what a pleasant surprise." Katherine spent a few minutes catching up with her former employers, introducing Daniel properly, and thanking them again for their kindness during her difficult time. As they left the saloon, Katherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you for bringing me here today," she said as Daniel helped her mount her horse. "Did it help?" She nodded. "I needed to see it all again to realize it no longer has power over me." Daniel's eyes were warm with understanding. "You've come a long way from that first night I saw you here." "We both have," she replied softly. The ride back to Silvercreek was peaceful, both of them content in the companionable silence between them. As the ranch came into view, Katherine felt a surge of emotion. This place that had been her sanctuary had become her home in every sense of the word. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they'd established during their courtship, Daniel took her hand. "I've been patient," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But I find myself growing less so with each passing day." Katherine smiled. "Are you suggesting our courtship has gone on long enough?" "I'm suggesting that I love you, Katherine Hayes, and I want nothing more than to make you my wife." His blue eyes were earnest. "If you're ready." Katherine considered the journey that had brought them to this moment, from the tragedy of James's death to the humiliation of the saloon, from Daniel's unexpected offer to the deep bond they now shared. "I'm ready," she said simply. "I love you, Daniel. I think perhaps I have since that night you stood up for me in the saloon, though I didn't recognize it then." The joy that spread across his face was answer enough, but his kiss, deeper and more passionate than their previous embraces, sealed their commitment. They were married in May, with a small ceremony at the ranch. Elena decorated the house with wildflowers, and Jose persuaded a traveling minister to officiate. The ranch hands scrubbed themselves to unaccustomed cleanliness, and neighbors from surrounding properties came to celebrate. Even Beatrice and Sam Fletcher made the journey from Globe, Beatrice dabbing at her eyes throughout the ceremony. "I knew that man was smitten the moment I saw him watching you in the saloon," she told Katherine afterward. "Had that look men get when they've been struck by lightning but don't quite realize it yet." Katherine laughed. "He claims he only offered me the housekeeping position out of compassion." "Compassion may have opened the door," Beatrice said wisely, "but it was something else entirely that made him keep looking at you like you hung the moon." The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing under the stars. When the last guests had departed or retired to the bunkhouse, Daniel led his new wife upstairs, not to her former room, but to the master bedroom they would now share. "Are you happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" he asked, closing the door behind them. Katherine smiled at the new name. "Completely." In the privacy of their bedroom, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their passion tempered by tenderness. Katherine found in Daniel's arms a belonging she'd never experienced before, a sense that she was precisely where she was meant to be. Afterward, lying in the circle of his embrace, Katherine marveled at the path that had led her here. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would find this kind of happiness again, I would never have believed them." Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. "Life has a way of surprising us." "Indeed it does." She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I'm grateful for the surprise that brought you into my life, even if the circumstances were difficult, as am I." His arms tightened around her. "Sleep now, wife. Tomorrow begins our new chapter." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the O'Malleys of Silvercreek Ranch. The territory continued to grow and change, with statehood on the horizon and increasing settlement, transforming the once wild landscape. Daniel expanded the ranch operations, adding sheep to their cattle and hiring additional hands. Katherine maintained the household, but also developed a reputation as a skilled healer, often called upon by neighbors in times of illness or injury. She studied medical texts Daniel ordered from back east, expanding her knowledge and abilities. Their family grew as well. In the spring of 1887, Katherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Daniel, honoring both the past and present. 2 years later, their daughter Rebecca Elena joined the family, a healthy, strong-willed girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's copper hair. Katherine sometimes thought about the twists of fate that had shaped her life, the tragedy that had left her a widow, the shame she'd endured in Globe, the unexpected offer from a quiet rancher that had led to such profound happiness. What had seemed like the darkest period of her life had ultimately led her to her true home and family. One evening in 1896, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Daniel took her hand, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their decade together. "Do you ever think about Globe?" he asked. "About how things might have been different?" Katherine considered the question. "Sometimes, but not with regret." She squeezed his hand. "Everything that happened led me here, to you and our children. I wouldn't change that, even if I could." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I rode through town last week. The silver dollars gone burned down last winter. They're building a hotel in its place. Times change. Indeed they do." He looked out over the ranch that had grown and prospered under their joint care. "But some things remain constant." Katherine followed his gaze, taking in the home they'd built together, not just the physical buildings, but the life they shared, the love that had grown stronger with each passing year. "Like us," she said softly. Daniel smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening, lines she'd watched form over their years together, each one a record of their shared joys and sorrows. "Like us," he agreed, pulling her close as the sun set over Silvercreek Ranch, painting the sky in shades of promise fulfilled.